to start off with a tent below our horizon line, we're going to start with a line, but instead of starting with a vertical line, we're actually going to start with a diagonal line. This diagonal line is still the corner of my tent. Now, the first thing that you have to decide is which direction your tent is going to be facing. My opening is going to be right here. So I put my line at a diagonal line going from right to left. Now, what I'll do is I'll take the top and the bottom of this line. They're going to go back to my vanishing point. Now remember that whenever you are ending a line, you always want to replicate the same type of line that you started with. So I'm going to put my ruler on my beginning line. I'm going to keep it parallel, decide how long I want my tent to be, and then draw my ending line. My ending line mimics my beginning line. Then I can erase any extra lines. Okay, now this is the side of my tent. Now, what we'll do next is the bottom of the tent is going to connect back to the other side vanishing point, like this. But right now, what I'll have to decide is kind of how big do I want my opening of my tent to be? Because the top of it is not going to go back to the other side or to this side like it did in if I was just drawing a rectangle. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to decide what angle, or basically how big I want my tent to be open, and I'll add in my ending line over here. So again, this line is not connected to either one of my vanishing points. What is going to be connected to my vanishing point, in order for me to make this tent open, like you could walk into it, is I'm going to take the very furthest corner right here, connect it back to my vanishing point, and only draw the line inside of here. Now what I've done is I have made an opening. I'll add a little bit of shading to this to make it a little bit more visible. So that is the side of my tent, and then this would be the floor of my tent, just like this. Okay, and that's if I wanted to actually walk into it. Now, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to actually add an opening to the side of my tent. Okay, now it would look unusual if I actually started off with a vertical line. What I want to do is I want to actually mimic my beginning line right here. And I'm going to basically kind of make like a little window on the side of the tent. The top and the bottom, just like we did with our rectangles. The top and the bottom are going to go back to that side vanishing point. Take my ruler, slide it back, keeping it parallel. And I can end it right there. Erase these extra little bits. Okay, just like this. Now, here's something else. If this was a true opening, then I would actually be able to see inside of this tent right here, which means that I actually have to finish drawing this correctly, like it was a glass tent. So what I'm going to do is this far side is going to come over to the right side, but I'm only going to draw inside the window. This line that I drew from this corner, I'm going to extend because I'll be able to see a little bit of it right here. Okay. Now, what this means is this little part right here, this little corner right here actually is the far side of this line connecting to my top. So what I'll do is this little corner is going to connect to the top and draw a little line like that. So what I'm seeing here is this side of my tent is actually continued right here. The floor of my tent is actually visible through this line right here, through this window, this opening that I made, just like this. Okay. Now this could actually either be open on this side, or I could make it really dark like it was the back panel of my tent and it was closed. Okay, so let's do another one, but let's have it going the other direction. So instead of me starting with my angle like this, I'm actually going to start with the angle like this. So again, the top and the bottom are going to go back to my vanishing point. Just like so. Take my ruler, slide it back, erase this extra line. The bottom goes back to my other side vanishing point. I'm going to make this one a little narrower. So the bottom connected back. Remember that this one, this line, this ending line right here is just dependent on how wide I want my opening of my tent to be. I could have made this line longer and made it really spread out like that, but that's not what I wanted to do. Now, if I was making a closed tent, maybe I just wanted to put a line, like there was a zipper right there, then I would draw just a vertical line going down the front of this. Okay. Let's move on. I want to show you how to do one that is on the horizon line, and then we'll do one that is above the horizon line that's kind of floating up in the air. So again, just like I started these other ones, I am going to start with a vertical line, or I'm sorry, a diagonal line. The top and the bottom are going to go back to my vanishing point, just like that. Slide this back. I'll end this one right here. Erase this, erase the horizon line that is going through my piece. The bottom of it is going to go however wide I want that to be, and then I will end it by adding the far side line. Notice that actually nothing changed from here to here. The change that we're going to see is when we do one above the horizon line. So let's start with one over here. I'm going to do one at an angle like this. Okay. Again, top and bottom go back to my vanishing point like that. My ruler, keep it parallel. Draw it down like this. Okay. Now, I'm going to take the bottom of this, it's going to come back to my vanishing point. So the length of this line depends on how wide I want my tent to be open. Okay, I'm going to decide on that. The ending line here, actually I'm going to shrink that just a little bit. The ending line here is just connecting the top and the bottom like this. Now, just like we did with rectangles and squares, these 2 points are going to go crisscross each other to the opposite side vanishing point. Now this is if my tent was actually just floating in the air, kind of like that. All right, so there I've got a tent that is above my horizon line. So I'm gonna start off very similar to like what I did here. The difference is going to be when we draw the top line. Okay, so I'm gonna start off in the same way. I'm gonna start off with a diagonal line, okay? The 2 bottom lines are gonna go back. Now, one thing to kind of remember about pyramids is that they typically are the same, they're a square on the bottom usually. And so you want to try to keep the same length of these 2 lines. Now, what happens here is instead of the top of it going back to my vanishing point, the top of it is actually going to go straight down or connect to this corner, and this one is going to connect to this corner. Now, shading makes a huge difference right now because this kind of looks like a diamond with a line going through it. But if I start to add some shading to it, maybe a little bit darker on the bottom and lighter towards the top. Okay, once I put some shading on that, then it kind of starts to help give the illusion of that space. This is actually the same way that you would do this in 1 point perspective, or similar to it. All right, let's do one that is over the horizon line. I'm going to start with a line. The bottom of it is going to go back to my vanishing point, both sides vanishing points. Then I will simply end the line, deciding how wide I want that to be. Erase your extra lines that are going through it. Okay, so again, here I've got my my piece drawn in 2 point perspective. Now, here's the fun one. When we have anything above the horizon line, remember that we'll see the front, the side, and the bottom of it. And so what we're going to do is we'll start off with this angled line again. The bottom of it goes back to both sides vanishing points. Just like this. Decide how long I want those boxes to be. Gonna end them there. Gonna end this one. Actually, I'm gonna end both of them just a little bit shorter than the lines that I drew. Just like that. Now, the corners here are gonna go opposite sides. So this one will come towards the left-hand side. This one will come towards the right-hand side, just like that. And there I can see the bottom of my pyramid. in 2-point perspective. Now, if I wanted to add openings onto any of these, what I would do is I would follow the main edges just like I've done here. I started with this. The bottom of it is going to go back to my vanishing point. And then I want to try to follow this edge and keep that parallel. And so I did this. Now, if I wanted to be able to see into this, I have two options. I could either do like my tent where I went from the corner like this, or I'm going to show you another method. If I wanted to just go from this and pretend like that was the thickness of the wall of the pyramid, I would take this corner and go back in the go back to the other vanishing point, and there I've got my wall. Basically, this is my side wall going like that. Notice that I'm trying to actually keep my shading in the same direction as the line that I see here. I'm going to use this right here as my guide and add that right there. Okay, so there is some shading. I'll make the floor of it a little bit darker so it can stand out a little bit more. Okay, just like that. All right, now what I'm going to do is on this same page, I'm going to make some cylinders. Now, the cylinder requires some extra steps. In order to do a cylinder, you're actually going to start off with a rectangle. The rectangle is going to be larger than what you need it to be. It's going to end up being almost half the size. So we would do a normal rectangle going back like this. I'm going to actually end mine right here. Okay, now my cylinder for this illustration is going to be open at the top, just like this one right here. Right, so I'll do the other side. You want to try to keep the length of line approximately the same. Just like that. Release that extra. The top and bottom go to opposite sides, just like this. And like this. Okay, now what you have to do is another step. In order to figure out what basically what the size of the oval is, or the narrowness, the thinness of the ellipse or the oval that is going to go on top, is why we are actually doing this. Now, remember, this is a very important thing to remember that we learned at the beginning of the year, is that the closer things get to the horizon line or your eye level is the more narrow the lines become, or the less curved the lines become. As they get further away from the horizon line, the more curved they become. Okay, and so what we are, the whole purpose of making this rectangle is to figure out what that oval is going to look like. Now what I've done is I have taken this line and I've divided it in half, just like that. And I would do the same thing on the two bottom lines. Okay, now what happens is you want your oval to actually fit and touch these midline points. Can actually draw this going like this. Okay, now remember that ovals are not pointy on the end, they are actually rounded. All right, now from this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my two furthest points right here, and they're actually going to go straight up and down. Okay, which should be approximately where this ends right here. Now, taking a look at this curvature of line right here, I'm going to kind of mimic it. It's actually going to expand just a little bit further down because it needs to touch those edges. But here, what I've done is I've figured out what the ellipse needs to look like. I've made the sides of it, so notice that my cylinder is not the width of the original rectangle. It is actually almost half the size. Then what I would do is I would actually erase all of the extra lines that go around it. Okay. So one important thing to remember in this is just like with our tents, here where my beginning line and my ending line were at the same angle, or they mimicked each other, they copied each other. The same line that you have right here, this curved line right here, is going to be the same type of curved line that you have right here. Okay, now what if we wanted to do one where the opening was on the side instead? So let's do this. Let's do this one above the horizon line. So I'm actually, again, I start off with a straight line, a vertical line, and this time I've got more space on this side, so I'm going to make it a little bit longer on this side. Okay, gonna have it go end about right here, and then this side I want actually to be a little bit more narrow because this is where my opening is going to be. All right, erase those extra bits. Okay, so again, this is where my ellipse is going to be. I am going to, on the side of this, figure out where these need to go, approximately where they need to go, because this is where the edges of my curved line are going to be. Remember that the only way we would actually see a complete circle is if we were looking directly on at the circle or at the cylinder. So now what we're going to do is the very top and bottom of this are going to, actually what it's going to amount to is the very highest edge that is showing up is going to come back here. The very bottommost edge of my cylinder is going to come back here. And this would actually help if I did a complete glass box here, so I would know where all right, so what's happening? All right, so what's going to happen then is that the line that I have here should mimic this line right here. The curvature basically of this line should match the curvature of this line. And then you can erase your extra lines that are going through it. So if I added a little bit of shading to this, there you can see inside of my cylinder. This is the outside of my cylinder here. And then I would erase all of those extra lines that I used to help guide me to get the correct opening of the cylinder. Okay. Now, you may be wondering about a sphere. A sphere is basically just a circle that, let's see, I'll just use this. A sphere is a circle that has shading on it. Okay. And so there's really no way to draw it in 2-point perspective. All you're going to do with a sphere is simply add shading to it as you normally would. So okay, I did want to show you also how to add openings onto curved objects in 2-point perspective. So let's do a opening on the side here, and then we'll do an opening up here. So whenever you're adding an opening onto the side, you really want to try to follow the main curved lines that you see. And so I'm going to try to follow the curvature of this line right here. And then I'll follow the lines that are on the side. This one is going to actually be a fairly big opening. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'm going to again follow the curvature of the line here. Now, if I wanted to make a wall thickness to this particular cylinder, what I would do is a little bit more complex, okay? Kind of like this one right here. What I would do is this little corner right here and this little corner right here are going to go back to their opposite side vanishing points, okay? So I'm just going to draw a little line here, and then I'm going to come on the other side and draw a little line here. Now, instead of me putting a straight line right here, I want to follow the curvature of the line that I see right here. So even though it's a small curve, it's still a curve. The inside of this, the lines from the corners here are just going to go straight up and down. They're going to follow this. They're going to follow this edge right here. So if I added some shading to this on the inside, so we'll imagine that the inside of our cylinder is dark. That might help you to be able to see a little bit. I could even add just a little bit of shading right here, just to kind of help you see that. All right, just like that. If I wanted to add an opening on the side here, I'm actually going to add it over here, because one thing that I want to do is I want to finish the edge here. So we'll come back to that in just a second. So again, what I'm trying to do, I'm going to make an opening on the side of this. Let me erase the rectangle so that you can see just, oops, so you can see just the cylinder itself. Okay, so my opening over here, I'm going to do this fairly big, and it's going to come all the way over to here. Okay, so again, I'm trying to put in these curved lines that really echo what the line that I drew in the first place. And then I will connect the bottoms. Notice that these are going in back to my vanishing point, just like that. Okay, now here's something different. Below our horizon line in the window sill, we could see the bottom and the sides. What's going to happen over here is this far corner right here, I'm going to connect back to my other side vanishing point. So I'm going to put a little line like that. This part is going to mimic this part. Okay, this curved line, same as this curved line. The top of this is going to connect to my vanishing point. Go back in this other direction. Now let me do a little bit of erasing so that we can see this a little bit better. Okay, now because of my placement of my opening, I can actually see the back side of the cylinder. That's what this part is right here. This is the back side of the cylinder. And so I'm going to add a little bit of shading onto that so that you can see, so it kind of separates it a little bit. And then this part right here is the inside. This back wall is extending back here. So let's put a little bit of shading on this. Okay, so get that? This is the other part of this. So notice that what I did was I took my pencil and finished that out so that it would mimic kind of what I'm seeing right here. Okay, and then continued to add shading and whatnot. So this is like, if I put an extra line on the inside to kind of show that maybe there's a wall, the thickness. Oops. Okay, so like this would be the front. And then this is the inside. Just like that. So this thickness is the same as this thickness right here. Okay, so that's what that is. All right, that is how you add on openings to cylinders. If I was going to add an opening onto a sphere, I would just try to think of how the contour of a sphere works. And the placement of it in relation to the horizon line. Lines above the horizon line are going to curve upwards. Below the horizon line are going to curve downwards, just like this. Okay, now again, the two corners are going to go back to my vanishing point like this. The curvature of the line is going to be the same there. This is also going to be a curved line too, but we want it to kind of angle towards that vanishing point. So it's actually not straight, it's actually curved. Kind of like that. And then this would be the inside of my sphere. Just like that.